Have you ever thought about how Neville Longbottom's fate might be even sadder than Harry Potter's? What if the movies never truly showed the depth of his tragedy? In today's video, you will uncover the heartbreaking truth about his life. Neville Longbottom, clumsy, timid, and often the punchline of a joke. Throughout the Harry Potter series, he was mocked not only by the cruel Slytherins, but even by his fellow Gryffindors. To many viewers, he was just comic relief, a contrast that made the main characters seem smarter and braver. It wasn't until the final films that Neville was portrayed as a true hero. But even then, his story felt incomplete. In reality, his journey was far more painful, filled with tragedy that rivaled, even surpassed, Harry's own. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were brave Aurors who fought against Voldemort as part of the Order of the Phoenix. When the Dark Lord learned of a prophecy about a child who could destroy him, two families fit the description, the Potters and the Longbottoms. Voldemort chose to hunt Harry, but he sent his Death Eaters after Neville's parents. What followed was unspeakable. Frank and Alice were tortured for so long with the Cruciatus curse that they lost their minds. They weren't killed, but they were taken away from their son forever, locked in a hospital, unable to recognize him. Neville grew up an orphan with living parents, raised by his strict grandmother, who constantly compared him to the father he could never live up to. She doubted his abilities. Even his own family thought he might not be magical at all, resorting to terrifying tricks just to force his magic to appear. When he finally arrived at Hogwarts, things didn't get easier. Bullied mercilessly by Slytherins, ignored by Gryffindors, even underestimated by professors, Neville was always in the background. While Harry and his friends dove into adventure after adventure, Neville struggled to make friends or earn respect. But something changed. Slowly, he began to show the courage of a true Gryffindor. By the final battle, he wasn't just standing in the shadows. He was facing Death Eaters head-on, even striking the final blow by destroying Voldemort's last Horcrux, the Snake Nagini. Yet, despite everything, his future felt strangely underwhelming. While Harry, Ron, and Hermione took on prestigious roles in the wizarding world, Neville became a professor of herbology. He married Hannah Abbott, not Luna Lovegood, despite hints of a connection between them in the books and movies. For someone who endured relentless bullying, a tragic childhood, and a lifetime of self-doubt, Neville proved himself a true hero. But was he ever given the recognition he truly deserved? Have you ever wondered what Neville Longbottom's life was really like after Hogwarts? What if his journey didn't end with the Battle of Hogwarts, but instead took a turn no one expected? In today's video, you will uncover what happened to him after the war and why his story remains one of the most overlooked in the entire Harry Potter series. The final battle was over. Voldemort was gone. Hogwarts lay in ruins, and its students were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered world. For Neville, victory came at a price. He had spent years being overlooked, laughed at, and underestimated, only to prove in one night that he was more than anyone had ever believed. He was a warrior, a leader, a hero, but the problem with war is that it doesn't just end when the last battle is won. The scars it leaves behind don't fade as quickly as the bodies disappear from the battlefield. Neville never sought glory. He never fought for recognition. He fought because he had to, because he had no other choice. But as the dust settled and life returned to normal, he found himself lost in a world that had moved on without him. He had spent so much time preparing to fight that he never stopped to think about what came next. Everyone else had a path. Harry had fame and legacy. Ron had his family and a future at the Ministry. Hermione had a career built on intelligence and ambition. But Neville had never been the chosen one. He had never been destined for greatness. He had simply been a boy trying to survive. Becoming a professor wasn't a dream for him, it was a safe choice. He had always loved herbology, always felt at ease among the quiet living things that didn't expect him to be anything more than what he was. Plants didn't laugh at him, they didn't doubt him, they simply grew, as he did, at their own pace. Teaching gave him stability, a sense of purpose, but deep down there was a part of him that wondered if this was all there was. If the boy who once stood against Voldemort himself was really meant to spend his days tending to greenhouses and grading essays, his marriage to Hannah Abbott was much the same, comfortable, predictable, a choice that made sense. They understood each other, both having endured the war and the losses that came with it. But love, that was something else entirely. The books and movies hinted at something different, a connection between Neville and Luna Lovegood, two outsiders who saw the world in a way no one else did. She had always been kind to him. She had always believed in him when no one else did. But in the end, they went their separate ways. And maybe that was for the best. Or maybe it was just another part of his life that had been decided for him rather than by him. Neville was respected, but he was never admired the way Harry was. His role in the war was remembered, but it was rarely celebrated. He had fought just as bravely, had suffered just as much, and yet history would always see him as secondary. Even in his own mind, he struggled to see himself as anything more than the awkward boy who had once tripped over his own robes. There were nights when he couldn't sleep, when the echoes of the past haunted him in ways he didn't fully understand. He saw Bellatrix Lestrange's face in his dreams, heard his parents' screams in his mind, felt the weight of the sword in his hands as he cut through Nagini's flesh. He would wake up in a cold sweat, gasping for breath, only to remind himself that the war was over, that he had won. But had he? He visited his parents in St. Mungo's more often than he admitted to anyone, sat beside them, spoke to them, even though they never truly heard him. His mother would sometimes hand him candy wrappers, her only way of connecting with him. And each time he would take them with a forced smile, pretending that they meant something more than they did. He wanted to believe that there was a part of them that still recognized him, that somewhere beneath the damage, beneath the years of suffering, they were still his parents. But deep down he knew the truth. They were lost to him, and no amount of courage could bring them back. Life moved on, but the past never let go. Every time he stepped into his classroom, he saw reminders of the people who were gone. He saw the desk where Colin Creevey should have sat, the hallway where Fred Weasley once cracked jokes, the Quidditch pitch where so many had once cheered. Hogwarts was a place of learning, of magic, of wonder. But for Neville it was also a graveyard. Still, he did his best. He taught his students with kindness, with patience, with the understanding that not everyone was born a hero. He saw himself in the nervous first years who struggled to perform the simplest spells. He saw his past in the ones who were laughed at, who doubted themselves, who felt like they would never be enough. And he made sure that they knew they were. The wizarding world changed, but some things remained the same. Prejudice still existed, though it was quieter now, hidden behind polite words and forced smiles. Dark magic still lingered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Neville had spent so much of his childhood fearing that he wasn't enough, that he would never live up to the expectations placed upon him. But now he understood something that had taken him years to learn. True bravery wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It wasn't about wielding swords or casting powerful spells. It was about standing up again and again, even when the world told you to stay down. One day, long after the war had faded into memory, a young student approached him after class. She was small, quiet, the kind of child most people overlooked. She hesitated for a moment before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "Professor Longbottom," she said, "I read about what you did in the war, how you fought, how you never gave up." He looked at her, surprised. Most students wanted to talk about Harry, about the boy who lived, about the legends they had heard 100 times before. "You're the reason I didn't quit Hogwarts," she continued, "because if you could go through all of that and still be standing here, then maybe I can too." Neville didn't know what to say. For so long, he had believed that his story was just a footnote in someone else's tale. But in that moment, he realized something. He had mattered. He had made a difference. Not because he had slain a great serpent, not because he had fought in a war, but because he had survived, because he had kept going even when it would have been easier to give up, because he had shown that even the ones who stumble, who fall, who doubt themselves, can still rise in the end. He smiled at the girl, nodding. "You'll be just fine," he said. "I promise." And for the first time in a long while, he truly believed it.